My name is Josh Jenkins. This is my FTE 211 week 3 assignment. Today is March 27th, 2024. Before we get started this week, we're going to clear this weapon for safety. So first thing we're going to do, point in a safe direction. We're going to drop the magazine. We're going to show that there's no ammo in there. We're going to rack the slide back, lock it in place, show there's no ammo down there. We're going to do a visual and physical inspection of the weapon. Drop the hammer. This weapon has been cleared. All right, for this week, the ask is to choose 3 components, talk about their critical dimensions, what kind of failures they can have, what damage can be likely with these parts, any training that me as a gunsmith should have to prevent damaging these parts, and with the parts that I've chosen, what they interact with, the critical, the dimensions of the other parts that interact with them. So I have chosen for my parts the firing pin spring, the plunger spring, and then the extractor. So these 3 right here. So we'll start with the firing pin spring, and it's on the firing pin right now. So just pull it apart. So firing pin spring right there. So the critical dimensions that are associated with this are the tensioning of this spring. So whether it's too loose or too tight. So some of the issues that malfunctions that can happen are that the spring become, again, too loose or too tight. This can happen from, firing or trying to disassemble it, putting it back on. And so those malfunctions, that's the damage that can happen. The malfunctions is that the spring becomes too loose and the firing pin will no longer hit the primer correctly. It'll light strike, won't fire, or it misfires. So that's one of the malfunctions that could potentially happen here. The training that a gunsmith should have with something like that is to know that these pieces are, do have specific tolerances, and you should leave them as close to what they came out of the factory. And if you start getting light strikes, replacing those parts as well. Oh, and the parts that interact around this, again, the firing pin, the firing pin is definitely important. And then you got your cap back here for your firing pin cap as well. So those dimensions, and those can become worn as well over time. For the second piece that I've chosen, again, is the plunger spring, and it's got its little plungers on it right here as well. This is the critical dimensions, again, are tension, right? So these can become loose or stretched out over time. And what happens there is that this plunger actually interacts with both the slide stop here and the safety right here. So hold on, did I put the safety in wrong? And the safety right here. Safety right there. So what you get, and if this spring is not tensioned correctly, what can happen is the safety can malfunction and it won't work as a safety anymore, or the slide stop won't function correctly. It won't lock open on the last bolt, or it could potentially send the bolt too far, or the slide and the bolt and the receipt that can send the slide and the springs too far back and potentially damage the inner workings of this. So the other things that interacts with are the slide stop and our safety right here. The third piece that I've chosen is going to be the extractor right here. Again, the critical dimension on this is, again, tension, right? So the tension here, and making sure it's straight, fits in correctly into the frame, or not frame, into our slide right here, making sure that its tension, its tolerances are very, very tight. And you want to make sure that you have it straight and it's not bent or marred up in any way. The reason being is that if it's not set up like that, what can potentially start happening is that the extraction of spent rounds doesn't happen. So you could potentially get within the slide and the barrel a double feed, a stovepipe, all kinds of issues where the weapon just will not function as it should. It basically turns into a bolt action 1911, which is a brand new sentence. So that's the critical dimensions on that, and that's the parts around it that potentially could be affected if not used correctly. Those are my 3 parts. And back to kind of how a gunsmith can you know, anytime a part comes in, you know, someone can modify these to try to potentially, you know, if it starts wearing out, someone could try to Dremel that down to try to get that edge back, but that's not a great option. Replacing the part is the more optimal portion, specifically at these springs, especially around the 2 springs that I was talking about. Replacing springs is always going to be the most optimal way to prevent further damage to a weapon as these parts wear out. Because again, these parts do have a shelf life. Alrighty, now that we've got this weapon back together, we're going to do ourselves a functions check and a cycle of operations. First thing we're going to do, we're going to be using snap caps like we have been the last few weeks. Point in a safe direction. I'm going to put those into our magazine. Again, point in a safe direction. We're going to rack the slide back to feed chamber the round. Slam it into place, point in a safe direction. We're going to pull the trigger. It's going to fire. And now what we're going to do is we're going to simulate the extraction of the spent round. It gets shot out, and it's going to feed in chamber and load the next round. We're going to hold the trigger down to have the trigger reset. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fire again, simulate the rest of it. Round comes out, trigger resets, fire one more time. Did what it was supposed to. It locked open now. I'm going to drop the magazine, point in a safe direction. This weapon has been functions checked and reassembled correctly.